Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the Newstalk Radio Newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. With the news at this time, I am Tiana Jordan. A very good morning to you. First, the lead stories. Sugar workers are getting a 7% wage and salary increase for this year. The leader of the People's National Congress Reform is not opposed to meeting the Private Sector Commission as he calls for broader representation at the Commission. The Health Minister, Dr. Frank Anthony, says the decline in COVID cases on record may not be a true reflection of actual cases in Guyana. In regional news, the Antigua and Barbuda government makes a compassionate payment to former LIAT workers. And for the international news, we'll get the latest from the BBC World Service. The details of these and other stories coming up right here in just a moment.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return-to-work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner with results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
And now the news in detail. Workers of the state-owned Guyana Sugar Corporation, GuySuco, are to receive a 7% increase in wages and salaries. The decision was welcomed by the Guyana Agricultural and Workers Union, GAU, which recalled a commitment that had been given by Vice President Bart Jagdeo earlier this year. The union, which is closely aligned to the governing People's Progressive Party, PPP, said the pay hike for 2021 marked a reversal of a discriminatory policy of then David Granger-led coalition administration. GAU, which is closely aligned to the governing People's Progressive Party, estimates that between 2015 and 2019, sugar workers' real wages had declined by about 42%. The government had refused to meet with the Public Service Union, Teachers Union, and the Guyana Trades Union Congress to discuss wages and salaries. The People's National Congress Reform (PNCR) leader says he is not opposed to meeting with the Private Sector Commission (PSC). Mr. Aubrey Norton says the PNCR has always embraced the private sector and will continue to do so.
We believe in the private sector. There's a role for the private sector. I believe I will meet with the PSC. But when I meet with the PSC, we will discuss the situation and see where we go from there. I believe a political party should be in contact with all civil society. For instance, I've already begun to engage the religious community and a number of other bodies. I've been speaking to people in the trade union movement.
The PNCR leader says many requests were made of him to engage the PSC with a view to broadening its representation, which currently excludes many businesses. Mr. Norton was critical of the stance of the PSC being politically affiliated. He wants to see broad-based representation.
Many of them believe that the Private Sector Commission does not reflect their interests, and it tends to operate more on a political partisan basis. As a party, we will struggle for a private sector that is genuinely a private sector and not a commission that reflects narrow interests. And I want it to be made clear We are not anti-private sector. In fact, we believe the private sector should act as civil society, independent, pursuing the interests of the private sector. We conclude a lot of times the Commission doesn't do that, and therefore we need to have in place a private sector that reflects all ethnicities in this country and all businesses.
The PNCR leader says his party will strongly represent Guyanese and Guyanese businesses. Dr. Richard Van Westerals and Walter Lawrence have been appointed as advisors in the People's National Congress Reform, PNCR. Leader of the PNCR, Aubrey Norton, following the official declaration and installation of the party's leadership yesterday, said this is part of his approach to inclusive governance.
I will have discussions with these candidates, and there will be a role for them in the People's National Congress Reform once they agree. I've said that I've already begun to talk to Comrade Van Westerals, and I intend to speak with Comrade Harmon, and we will work the way forward. The only thing I can promise you is that anyone who wants to contribute to this party will be allowed to do so, whether they competed against me or not.
Mr. Norton also remarked that he will be consulting with former chairman Walter Lawrence to accept an appointment.
But I want to give a special thank you to the chairman of the party, Comrade Walter Lawrence, who managed excellently a period I would call the period of uncertainty. You surely brought certainty to it and give direction. As you all are aware, Comrade Lawrence indicated that she was not going to compete for any position on the executive, but may I also state that the second advisor to the party, and not necessarily in that order, will be Comrade Walter Lawrence.
He says key among those objectives is holding the governing People's Progressive Party and ultimately taking back the reins of government. The new leader of the People's National Congress Reform, Aubrey Norton, has hinted at changes in the parliamentary opposition in the National Assembly. Speaking to News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM, following the official announcement of Mr. Norton taking over the reins of PNCR, the new leader says there is likely to be some changes at parliament level which may involve the opposition leader being replaced. Norton says while not the priority, the executives of the party will decide.
The question of what steps will be taken will be discussed with the executive, and then based on the decisions of the executive, we'll move forward. I could say to you, however, is that one thing that is evident is that the party comrades who would have elected me seem to have suggested by the mandate that there is need for change at the parliamentary level.
Opposition leader Joseph Harmon had said during the party internal campaign that the leader of the party and the opposition leader should be the one person following traditions of former leaders of the PNCR. Mr. Harmon, after conceding to Mr. Norton, is now saying that he will remain opposition leader while his status in the party will be an ordinary member. Mr. Norton declined to comment on Mr. Harmon's latest position, but will only say that the party will discuss and decide the way forward. Mr. Joseph Harmon on Sunday said he would remain Guyana's opposition leader, although he was defeated by Aubrey Norton for the post of leader of the People's National Congress Reform, PNCR, which controls the opposition coalition. He noted that he would remain as an ordinary member of the PNCR, but would still be leader of the opposition a national constitutional office. Former PNCR leader David Granger, who is chairman of the PNCR-led A Partnership for National Unity, is legally the representative of the list of candidates for the coalition of APNU plus AFC, and so he enjoys the power of recall and replacement of parliamentarians. In the weeks running up to Saturday's election, Mr. Harman had pointed to the trend in which the PNCR leader is the opposition leader and had said that had been his goal. For his part, Mr. Norton had not committed himself on the topic when he had been quizzed about whether he would seek the replacement of Mr. Harman as opposition leader. Instead, Mr. Norton had indicated that would be a matter for the party to decide. The Health Ministry says it continues to see a decline in active cases but is vigilant against a surge. During his COVID update on Monday, December 20th, Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says more than 15 new cases were recorded.
Over the last 24 hours, we would have recorded 21 new cases. And right now, across the country, we have 818 active cases. In all the regions, we have active cases, but right now in Region 4, there are about 390 active cases across the region. That is followed by Region 6 with 189 cases, and Region 3 with 95 cases. So these are predominantly the areas where we have active cases.
Dr. Anthony says of those hospitalized, 26 persons currently in hospital are severely sickened by the virus.
As of yesterday, we've had 38 persons in hospital. Of the 38, 31 of them are at the Ocean View Hospital, with 11 persons in the ICU. Of the 38 that are in hospital, we have 26 persons who require oxygen, so they have a more severe form of COVID.
The health minister says the ministry has administered 408,838 first doses of COVID vaccines to adults 18 years and older, and 290,688 are fully vaccinated. Children 12 to 17 years old partially vaccinated, total 30,028, and 21,309 of the same age group are fully vaccinated. The minister says there are 9,156 persons who have received a booster shot. The Health Minister, Dr. Frank Anthony, says the decline in COVID cases on record may not be a true reflection of actual cases in Guyana. The Health Minister is urging caution as he discloses that a drop in the number of persons being tested for COVID-19 may be a factor for low numbers.
Those persons who believe they
Hello, I'm Moira Alderson with the BBC News.
One, we have seen that across the board, not a lot of people are coming to get tested, and therefore it might give us a sense that we have a decrease in cases, whereas if there's a drop in testing, then we wouldn't accurately be able to see what is happening with the pandemic across the country.
Dr. Frank Anthony has renewed his call for persons to get tested at any of the more than 100 established testing sites.
Those persons who believe they might have been exposed to COVID, we're asking them to go and get tested. We have testing sites in every region of the country. All our regional hospitals are equipped to do testing, so if you believe that you have been exposed to someone with COVID, we're encouraging you to go get tested. It's the responsible thing to do. because if you test positive, then you're required to isolate so that you don't continue that chain of spreading the disease.
There are now 818 active COVID-19 cases recorded across the country. 390 of those are in Region 4, Demerara Mahaica, with the remaining spread across the other regions. A 21-year-old man in Region 9, Upper Takatu, Upper Essequibo, has been arrested for allegedly raping a 21-year-old disabled woman. Police were told that the woman was home alone when the man went to the premises. He held the woman down and raped her. Investigations say that relatives found her crying and then she told them of the ordeal. The man was arrested by public-spirited citizens and handed over to police. After he was told of the allegation, the man told investigators that he went to charge his phone and he held her for 1 minute and she told him to stop and he stopped. He was placed into custody pending investigations. A deportee has been arrested for allegedly being in possession of more than 2 kilograms of cocaine. The Customs Anti-Narcotics Unit, CANU, says he was arrested on Austin Street, Camerville, yesterday. Anti-drug agents say that when he was approached, he crashed his bicycle into a parked vehicle. A search was conducted and CANU says a brick-like object was found in his bag. He was then taken to his home where CANU says another brick-like object was found. The anti-drug agency says the more than 2 kilograms of cocaine was most likely being prepared for trafficking to the United States. The street value is estimated at almost $14 million. A laborer was yesterday knocked down and killed by a vehicle at Hack's Rice Mill compound, Golden Grove, West Coast, Berbice. Police say that at about 11 hours 30 yesterday, 18-year-old Tularam Harry of 855 Bath Settlement, West Coast, Berbice, was killed. He was struck by a motor lorry with trailer that was driven by 24-year-old Asad Baksh, also known as Black Boy, of 15 Section 8D Edward Village, West Coast, Berbice. Police say that Mr. Baksh was reversing the lorry when the container into the boiler area for the container to be loaded with bulk rice when a laborer alerted him to stop. The driver told investigators that he immediately stopped, exited the lorry, and went to the back of the vehicle where he saw Harry lying on the ground, motionless. The body was picked up and taken to the Fort Wellington Public Hospital, where he was pronounced dead by a doctor on duty. And now for the regional news. The government of Antigua and Barbuda on Monday dispatched $2 million Eastern Caribbean dollars to the Liat Court-appointed receiver for distribution to resident former Liat workers. The Antigua newsroom reports that the sum is intended to meet partial satisfaction of the cash component of the compassionate payout which the Antigua and Barbuda government has volunteered. The government extends the compassionate offer, though the government has no legal obligation to make any such payments. The Antigua newsroom says the payment by the government of Antigua and Barbuda is a compassionate payment intended to bring some Christmas cheer to those who have been unable to earn incomes since they were severed from the airline. The payment is limited to former Liat workers resident in Antigua and Barbuda. Trinidad and Tobago's Secretary of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, Dr. Faith B. Israel, has described the COVID-19 vaccine mandate for public sector workers starting mid-January as a continued trend by the central government to shame the population. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley made the announcement on Saturday as he cited rising COVID-19 figures, hospitalizations and deaths. He said the negative effect on the health system and the economy required intervention. Dr. Rowley says workers, including those in the Tobago House of Assembly, who do not comply, will not be paid their salaries. PM Rowley says exemptions will only be made for people who have medical reasons for not being vaccinated. Dr. B. Israel says it is never easy to say goodbye to a loved one. The Health Secretary says the current situation of high cases, hospitalization and deaths was predicted several months ago, and it's unfortunate that the system was not prepared for high numbers. Dr. B. Israel says the new announcement of mandatory vaccinations has shown that the central government has not yet shifted its communication strategy, which is unfortunate for the populace. In an update to its vaccination drive, the division said 23,654 people are partially vaccinated, while 22,772 people are fully vaccinated. The division said 2,113 people have received booster shots. Less than a week into the winter tourist season, Jamaica is reporting visitor arrivals. It says compare favorably with the pre-coronavirus COVID-19 era. Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett says since December 17th, there has been an increase in flight arrivals. He says Saturday's 9,153 arrivals from 62 flights is the biggest single-day record for Jamaica since the airports were reopened on June 15 last year. A statement released by the Ministry of Tourism noted that over the past 3 days, an estimated 25,000 passengers passed through the Sangster International Airport SIA in Montego Bay, figures not released since 2019. The tourism minister says that barring any fallout from the Omicron variant of the virus, there is every reason to believe that Jamaica will record increased visitor arrivals. Mr. Edmund Bartlett says that in meeting with international partners in some of Jamaica's main source markets, interest in the island remains very high, as Jamaica continues to be the first-rate and a first-choice destination. Meanwhile, Chief Strategist Senior Advisor in the Ministry of Tourism, Delano Savright, says that Jamaica's cruise numbers will see an exponential increase in early 2022 when the Western Caribbean route is fully opened. And now for the international news, the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm Moira Alderson with the BBC News. Rescuers reaching islands in the Philippines that had been cut off by last week's strong typhoon have discovered scores more dead and flattened villages. Typhoon Rai has devastated 9 islands and has killed at least 375 people. Our correspondent, Howard Johnson, is on Siargao Island, one of the worst affected. He says people are desperate.
They are worried that not many people know about this because the internet here is down, so no one's really able to get across their frustrations with the speed at which aid is being handed out. The provincial governor today told me when the tide is low, they can't get the ships in. Today we saw a C-130 military plane fly in with some supplies that will be distributed later. But people need clean water and they need electricity and they need as many technicians to come here to help rebuild the grid, because they believe it will be down for at least 3 months here.
At least 14 people have died in the worst floods Malaysia has seen in decades. 3 days of torrential rain over the weekend caused severe flooding. Towns and villages have been partially submerged and tens of thousands of people displaced. The government's come under fierce criticism for failing to issue warnings before the flooding began and for a slow response. There are fears the number of people killed will rise sharply as more bodies are found. The World Health Organization has urged people to take coronavirus prevention measures seriously as the Omicron variant spreads rapidly around the world. A WHO spokeswoman, Margaret Harris, told the BBC it was vital people wore masks, maintained social distance and avoided unnecessary travel over Christmas, and vaccines were still crucial.
When it comes to having a large gathering, this is not a wise thing to be doing at this point when you have a virus transmitting so rapidly through your community. And of course, the authorities need to be accelerating vaccinating people who've not yet been vaccinated, really finding the groups of people who've not yet been vaccinated and helping them to get vaccinated.
Japan has executed 3 prisoners by hanging. They'd been on death row for several years after being convicted of multiple murders. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes is in Tokyo.
The 3 death row inmates will have been woken up before dawn this morning to be told that this was the day of their executions. They would then have been taken to a special execution chamber and hanged until dead. The man executed in Osaka had been convicted of killing 7 members of his own family. The 2 men hanged in Tokyo had killed 2 employees at a pachinko parlour. Japan says it uses execution only sparingly and for the most egregious murders. Public support for the death penalty remains very strong in Japan.
Rupert Wingfield-Hayes reporting. BBC News. Warplanes from the Saudi-led coalition have carried out a series of airstrikes on what it called military targets at Sana'a airport in Yemen. It's held by Iranian-backed Houthi rebels who said the airport had been put out of operation. The UN said aid flights into Sana'a had been halted for the time being. Russian media say contacts have begun between Washington and Moscow over security guarantees demanded by Russia last week. The reports say the Kremlin is waiting for a formal response from NATO. Moscow's demands include a commitment from NATO to end any expansion of the alliance. In response, the US said it was prepared for a dialogue. Military officials in France say their troops have killed a senior Islamic State commander in Niger, suspected of involvement in the murders of 6 French aid workers and their 2 local guides last August. The French army said Soumana Boura was killed in a drone strike. A Christian charity in the United States says 12 of its missionaries who were held hostage for 2 months in Haiti managed to escape on their own. They'd been abducted by a gang for ransom. Rory Gallimore has this report.
Christian Aid Ministries held a press conference featuring footage of smiling missionaries singing to explain just how a group that included a 10-month-old baby evaded the clutches of an armed gang. It was, said a spokesman, a daring escape.
When they sensed the timing was right, they found a way to open the door that was closed and blocked, filed silently to the path that they have chosen to follow, and quickly left the place that they were held.
Under cover of darkness, the group trekked for hours through thick undergrowth, using the stars to find their way before eventually reaching safety. The gang who kidnapped them had been demanding $1 million for each captive.
Rory Gallimore reporting. That's the latest. BBC News.
The news came to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
And now to end the news, here's a recap of the leads. Sugar workers are getting a 7% wage and salary increase for this year. The leader of the People's National Congress Reform is not opposed to meeting the Private Sector Commission as he calls for broader representation at the Commission. The Health Minister, Dr. Frank Anthony, says the decline in COVID cases on record may not be a true reflection of actual cases in Guyana. In regional news, the Antigua and Barbuda government makes a compassionate payment to former Liat workers. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio Newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.